All right, I see that folks are starting to trickle in. Thank you so much for joining us on the final part of our Storytellers Camp. Thank you all so much for sticking around with us for the last couple of hours. Hopefully, we're going to divulge some secrets in the next 40 minutes. My name's Sharlene. I am one of the reporters here at Future of Good. I'm joining you all today from Toronto, which is Treaty 13 territory and the traditional lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, and the Wendat peoples. It's a real pleasure to be here today along with my boss, my manager, Elisha. We have a great time working together. And hopefully you can all see the sort of heart and soul that we put into our coverage at Future of Good. I don't want to speak on behalf of Elisha, but we love what we do, and we're really excited to share a little bit more about the sort of behind the scenes of what happens in a newsroom and really how we go about making decisions on what we cover and how we cover it. So Elisha is our resident expert for this. I will obviously chime in where it feels appropriate, but Elisha has a ton of experience in journalism and working in newsrooms. So I think in previous sessions you've done something similar in terms of just unmuting, joining. I believe you get 60 seconds to sort of ask your question, set some context. So please do feel free to do that. As Elisha is chatting, I will also be monitoring the Zoom chat. So if there's anybody who wants to drop a question into the Zoom chat, we will make sure that it's asked as well. But the more people that can come and talk to us on camera, the better. So please do feel free to hop in. And same as previous sessions, if you can raise your hand in the Zoom function as well, which I believe is a function at the bottom of your screen under React, we will come to you as well. But we've got 40 minutes and I'm sure we'll have lots and lots of questions and discussion points to get through. Elisha promises me that she can talk for a little while about this, so we could get started now. Elisha, the question that we have centered this session around is really how newsrooms work. So I'm going to just start there for you. In your experience, you've been in journalism a really long time. What happens in a newsroom that perhaps is difficult for folks outside of a newsroom to fully grapple with?
So just a little bit of background. I've worked in newsrooms. I'm coming up on my 25th year as a journalist, which scares the heck out of me when I think about it. But I've worked in newsrooms big and small. So from, the rural Manitoba newsrooms to CBC to everything in between. And now at Future of Good, not only are we a newsroom, but we're also a nonprofit and we're a learning organization. So it does make for some unique challenges. I think the biggest misunderstanding people have is that journalists just happen to know that we somehow absorb information through osmosis. It's out floating in the ether. And and then we somehow know that something is happening or something is going on. And then they get very upset when we do not cover their event, their issue, whatever it is. So one thing I like to start with is to say, if you don't tell us, we definitely will not cover you. Probably by far the biggest question I get, or the most common question I get, is how do I get you guys to cover my thing? How do I get you to cover, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing this charity walk, we're doing this event. How come the media doesn't come out and talk to us? And there's so many factors into what we cover, not only as Future of Good, but even just a regular newsroom, what you cover day to day, and it depends on a lot of things. First one, of course, it depends on resources. When you're a small newsroom, you have to be really picky about what you choose to cover. So you want to make sure that, what we're covering has the most impact, that affects the most people, or is such an important issue that we can't not cover it. Second thing is probably what else is happening in your community and in the world, in your neighborhood that day. It changes from day to day. It changes from hour to hour. And breaking news does pop up. Now, Future of Good's a little different in that we don't have a lot of breaking news. We tend to focus on, kind of more the systemic issues and the bigger things that are happening rather than the day to day. But it still does happen to us. So sometimes you send something out to a newsroom and they don't reply, and then the next day you send something else again and they do. It really comes down to the circumstances of what else is happening around us that day.
Hmm.
And probably the third thing that I would tell people is if you want to get a newsroom's attention, is you've got to do something different. I could, if we really wanted to, Future of Good could write 2 to 3 stories a day about the latest charitable foundation event, fundraising event, charity walk, charity run. Um, and not to diminish all of these things, but there are so many of them that if I cover one, I have to cover them all. And it can become really unfair that way, or feel like some are being given preferential treatment and some are being ignored. So if you want our attention, it has to be different. So if you're prone to doing, say, charity walks, George, who I think is in our audience, was wearing a Terry Fox t-shirt. The Terry Fox Run, it comes up in September. It's an annual event. And while doing that is good and you want people to know about it, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of those kinds of events every week, every day. So, but if George came to me and said, we're going to do a Terry Fox pogo stick race, then you've got my attention, because it's not a walk, it is something different. It's still the same kind of thing, but it suddenly has that kind of visual interest that will make people pay attention and break through that noise. And having, the guts to do something a little bit different is always going to get attention that way.
Hmm. I'm intrigued as to whether you've received any charity pogo stick press releases.
No, I'm waiting for the day for this to happen. Folks, somebody please organize a charity pogo stick race. I will cover the heck out of that just, to make myself happy.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay for everyone. What I would love to ask you though is on that note, not necessarily pogo stick level
Right.
of different, but what in your experience have you had examples where you've received something as a press release or as a communication from a charity or nonprofit that has really piqued your interest and made you think, huh, that organization is really, pushing the boat out, doing something differently, and they really deserve our attention.
It's probably hard to pick one because there are actually so many that are doing really cool things. And so many of you folks on this call, and even the people we've talked to in the past sessions, are doing things that literally have blown my mind, like, changing your name, uh, fighting for language and how important that is. All of those things are so important. Um, I'm trying to think of one that really sticks out, and I can't, because the charity and nonprofit sector is really, there's nobody else in Canada covering it. That's part of the reason why Future of Good exists. And so we get just a tidal wave of incredible story ideas all the time. And we do not have, I do not have a newsroom of 30 people to try and cover it all. So we've chosen to kind of look at things more from a systemic level rather than an individual event level. I would love to get to where where something really incredible comes in and I can cover it that way. And it's also a little different in that we have a national focus. We don't have that local little newsroom focus. So for Future of Good, we like to talk to places where they're willing to talk more on a national scope as well as on a local level of what they're doing and what maybe what they can teach other Canadians to do.
Absolutely. I do have a follow-up, but before that, look, I see that your hand is raised, so we'll come to you first.
Thank you. So we get a lot of questions, or I've heard a lot of questions about partnered content versus earned media, journalistic content. Can you break down what these different types of things are? Because I think that's also like really just a key part of media literacy. And sometimes even I get confused of like, you know, where do we slot these things in?
So partnered content and earned media, it really comes down to, and maybe this isn't the best word, but it really comes down to interference. Partnered content is something that you do with a partner, somebody who is paid for coverage, and somebody who has a say in how that coverage is shaped. Sometimes it goes as far as they will dictate the news story to you, and you write it, or the view that we try to take is that we will write a story with their view in mind. We will use some of their suggested ideas or suggested people that they want us to talk to, but we also we'll try to broaden it so that we can add more of a news value bent to it, because we've all seen, the clickbait that happens at the bottom of every news website, where it's either basically marketing copy, or it's a story designed to put in as many ads as humanly possible. The partnered content, at least at Future of Good, we do try to make sure that it is relevant to our audience and it will actually help them learn something. But that being said, when we work with a partner, they have a say. So we always identify at the beginning of every story that a partner has seen this content. They have been able to change certain things about the content. And when we say that this is partnered content, it literally means they have paid for it in some way. So in a journalistic newsroom, obviously none of that exists. We do our best to be free from influence, to be free from bias, to recognize our own biases. Everyone has a bias. Everyone has the way that they view the world. We try really hard to compensate for that. And the organizations or the people that we talk to, they don't get a say in how we present the story, what the story is about, the angle of the story. They're not allowed to fix their quotes. They're not allowed to do any of that. So, and that really goes down to transparency and trust, so that you know that a story of Future of Good that is not partnered, it means that we have done things as ethically and as free from bias as we possibly can. And the goal is to only tell the truth. And so it can be a confusing thing, but when you're a nonprofit, or frankly, any media landscape or any media group right now in Canada, we're all struggling with funding. We're all struggling with sustainability. So, that partnered content helps fund the newsrooms. And so it's a great way to work with really great partners, and Future of Good's really, really careful about who we work with. We have our own ethics and values. We make sure that our values align before we work with any partner. And then we want to ensure that that money that we earn from doing that is directed back to our learning programs, our newsroom, and supports our journalism. I hope that makes sense. It can be confusing, and it can be there are varied degrees of it. But kind of that overall, and it basically comes down to somebody is paid or somebody has not paid. That's pretty much it.
Absolutely. I see one hand up from Linda and a question from Molly, but before we dive in, I actually just think there's one more clarification that would be great to give our audience, and that is the difference between general assignment and beat reporting. I think that's jargon that we all get caught up in. And obviously Future of Good, as you've mentioned, is a little bit unique in that we kind of do have a beat as a newsroom, and then within our newsroom we also have very specific beats, but overall we have a very specific focus on the Canadian nonprofit and philanthropic sectors. So would you also talk a little bit about in your experience, the difference between general assignment and beat reporting, and to what degree you would see sort of tailored press releases or tailored communications to different types of news organizations?
For sure. So Future of Good is like you say, it is unique because we do take a broader view of things. And so that day to day, that breaking news or the general news, we don't cover as much as we honestly would like. So it can be, again, a little bit confusing, but all of our reporters, Sharlene included, they have a specific beat or a specific area that they cover. And Sharlene happens to be in AI, data, and technology. She covers that extremely well for us. And the reason we've done it that way is that when you develop a beat and when you become a beat reporter, you develop an expertise. You start to learn who the players are. You start to learn the politics behind it. And believe me, I'm sure you all know this, but there are a lot of politics in nonprofits. It really becomes, it gives you better insights and an ability to focus and to bring those insights into the newsroom and then to our audience by having a beat. A general reporter tends to cover the breaking news stories. They cover maybe the things that don't quite fit into the beat, but we really need to cover. Or they cover, they basically kind of do like the jack of all trades of the newsroom. So every newsroom tends to have, you have your beat reporters and you have your general news reporters, especially in larger organizations, Chorus, CTV, CBC, they have a combination of that, so that you're not just focused on breaking news or you're not just focused on one aspect of your storytelling.
Absolutely.
Does that clarify?
I think so. I hope so. If folks have follow-up questions on that, please feel free to chime in. I will say it also helps to, as Elisha said, go into something fully understanding what the politics and the context are that you're trying to report on. You're not sort of having to learn everything from scratch with every single story. You kind of are aware of the policy, for example, that impacts nonprofits. You're aware of some of the tax implications and tax exemptions and all that kind of thing. Whereas I think when you are a bit more of a general assignment reporter, the challenge there is you really have to learn everything from scratch almost every single time you go into a new big story. We've got loads and loads of questions and hands up. So Alison, I see your hand up. So I'm going to come to you first and then I'll turn to some of the questions in the chat. Oh, you're on mute, Alison.
There she is.
There
Go
we
ahead,
go.
Alison.
Oh, sorry, I didn't. Did Linda have a question? No, I thought, or not. Linda, did you have a question? I think she was ahead of me.
The hand disappeared, Linda. Did you want to chime in?
It disappeared temporarily, so I can come in after.
Okay, all right, I'll come to you after.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, great. Thank you so much. So thank you for this. This is so much fun. If you have an expert in your organization and you want to get them in front of media, do you have any suggestions for how best to do that?
Yes. So the press release is still king. I know that there's so many ways to get in touch with media through social media, through all these things, but sending a press release is still the easiest and fastest way to get through to a newsroom. Now, that being said, when you write a press release and you send it to a media organization, you have about 3 seconds to get their attention. And people are always kind of like shocked whenever I tell that story, but I'm going to tell you a story. I have a friend who's a local musician here in Winnipeg. She was putting out an album that was very, very important to her. And she had sent out a press release and got absolutely no pickup from the local media. And she asked me as her friend to look through it. And she had sent a press release that was approximately 1,200 words. It was massive. It was a wall of text. It explained absolutely everything, and it really became like your mind just kind of went blank looking through it. And I said to her, Lindsay, you didn't get any response because you overwhelmed people. When I get press releases and I get them constantly throughout the day, I am scanning very quickly. So and you don't have to be clever. You don't have to be, nobody's expecting you to come up with, beautiful graphics or whatever. But what I need from you is a very succinct pitch. So to say, my executive director is doing this. I think that it would make a great story. Here is why. This is how you get in touch with us. That's all we need. I don't need the full full crazy story. I don't need I don't need massive, bunch of quotes. I just need a really, try and keep it like 100 words, why we should talk to you. And that goes goes against a lot of marketing people's instincts, PR's people's instincts. They always want to provide as much information, which is great. But have that information ready. Don't overwhelm your reporters, because they are getting similar pitches all the time. And so if you can say something really briefly, it's like a 30-second elevator pitch. It's the same thing. You've only got a little bit of time to do that. So I helped Lindsay rewrite her press release. We chopped about 90% of it down. And we included a photo. That's, by the way, always include a photo. That helps us a lot. A good photo. And then she was picked up by the CBC and by one of our local music magazines. So
op-eds a good thing. What do you think of op-eds?
Op-eds are welcome. They have to go through some of the same processes. Like if you send us an op-ed that is unsolicited, that means there's less chance that I will pick it up, simply because I haven't talked to you about it. I don't know your background, and it still has to go through the same journalistic rigor as a news story. So it has to be fact checked. And if I haven't worked with you before, it can be challenging to do that. So reach out, offer an op-ed. You can even offer a sample if you'd like. But like I said, they are welcome. And if I can use it, I will. We've run numerous op-eds. But I do prefer if you reach out first to chat with us, so I can get a sense of who you are and your own motivation behind it.
Thank you.
Elisha, can I add to that as well, just based on what I've experienced?
Please.
I often find that as reporters, we're the ones reaching out to the experts based on what our story and what our instinct and what our where our research trajectory is heading. Something that's actually super simple, but I think really clever and really effective, is at the end of the interview on what we are supposed to be talking about, someone's gone, and can I just chat to you for 5 minutes about X thing? And actually, it's a really great way of just bringing it back to the top of a journalist's mind that there are other things that this organization or this expert is working on that might be of interest to us. Obviously, there's no, guarantee that that will lead to a full story, or even that I, as the reporter, will take it on. But just to know that you have that FaceTime with someone. And it actually has worked, previously in other interviews. In fact, I had one last week that was about a completely different thing. And right at the end of the interview, the person that I was speaking to said, and can I chat to you very quickly about X? Gave me a 1 minute long sort of elevator pitch, which is, I think, going to turn into a second story. So there is also that opportunity there, as when you do have somebody speaking to media, to take advantage of it, quite frankly, because it helps us quite a lot as well to not be sort of going through a sea of press releases, which often do sound quite similar, but to actually have spoken to someone and had that personal connection with them, and then for there to be something additional there is fantastic for us as well. So that's often really helpful. Linda, I am going to come to you because I accidentally skipped you earlier. I'm so sorry.
That's fine. I am said marketing person who loves to explain. So I have a question, because I work with Future of Good, but I also understand that a lot of impact work, the budget that you have is tiny for marketing, right? So you need this one press release to do a lot. It has a big lift to do. And I need to understand, and I think everybody in the room sort of has that same question of like, what is the middle ground between being clickbaity enough to get the attention of journalists on this cool project you're working on, and also we internally have a lot of buzzwords and internal verbiage, and because we spoke about language a lot even in the first session and how that matters, how far into defining our language should we go if we're trying to get attention, and how quickly can that be done in this tiny little 30-second, or do you say 3 minutes, you need to capture attention?
So let me be the first to say, and that everyone at Future of Good has dealt with this with me, is that I loathe jargon. Everybody has jargon. Future of Good has jargon. And every time someone on the leadership team has written an op-ed or written something, I have gone through and I have X'd out so much jargon. And jargon are those words where you know what is being said, but if you were to say that to your best friend, if they don't understand you, then I don't understand you. So make your language as clear and as simple as possible when you're pitching. When you get our attention, that is the time to work those words in. So we talked in a previous session about using the words, child sexual abuse imagery or child exploitation rather than child pornography or child porn. And while I don't want you to use the word child porn to get my attention, it's at that point where you do have my attention, that's the time to bring those words into fruition. Understand, journalists will make a judgment call on language when we're writing the story. We may not use exactly your language that you want. That can upset people. And I get that 100%. But we always have to balance what you're trying to say with being able to communicate to our readers. Now, I like to think that Future of Good readers, they're definitely more engaged, and they're smarter than the average bear, that they can handle a little bit of that kind of jargon. But when it comes to language, it's after you've made your initial pitch. So have that ready to go. Like, if Sharlene is calling you and after you sent out a press release and she needs clarity on some words, have that ready to go. But I suggest don't put it in your pitch. Don't put it in your initial outreach to us, because if I don't understand what's going on, I don't have time to go figure it out most of the time. I just don't. There's a couple questions in here that kind of relate to that about, when do you send your press release along, and how important is timing, and should you send out a press release twice? First of all, timing is everything. It is unpredictable, which makes it really hard because, again, you don't know what's going on in that newsroom. You don't know what the resources are like that day. So it's okay after a few days, if you haven't received anything, to send it out again and just say, hey, following up. If we don't respond to you, which will happen 95% of the time, do not take it personally. Please don't take it personally. And that's probably another big one. It can take a lot of courage and to reach out to a newsroom with your story, and it can be a really scary thing. And so my heart always breaks a little bit when I hear that, somebody has reached out to us, we couldn't do the story, and they were scared to reach out to anyone else or scared to bring it up again. It is almost never personal. It is, I can't even recall a time where I've looked through something and I'm like, well, I'm not doing the story because this person sent it. A story is a story, whether or not. And I have to balance, as the editor, I have to balance everything that's happening that day or that week or that month to see what we can do. So don't be afraid to send it out. In terms of timing, this is where you have to know who you're sending to. Daily news newsrooms they get hundreds of press releases a day, and they want to be able to cover something. If you send something, they want to be able to cover it that day. So what I suggest you do is, if you're going to be having an event or a press release, you invite the media the day before, and then the next day you send out your press release. If you're talking to a place like Future of Good, where our publishing schedule is a little more broad, then giving us some time to work through a story, especially so we can get to the nuance of it, is great. So a week is probably an excellent, kind of standard. Like, hey, we are doing this next week. We have somebody to talk to you. And then that gives us time to dig a little deeper, gives us time to perhaps get the story out before you do your event rather than after your event. If you're just talking more like a big systemic issue, then timing isn't quite as important. And you might have more success if you're sending it again. So don't be afraid to send it again. However, if you send it to me 10 times, I'm going to block you. I'll tell you that right now. I do have one person that I had to block because she literally sent me a press release a day with the same information over a 3-week period, just with the headline or the pitch a little bit different. While I admire her tenacity, it filled my inbox, and so she got shuffled into spam, I'm sorry to say. So reach out, if you have to, you can reach out twice. Don't take it personally if we don't respond. But if it gets into, you know, stalker level territory, I'm going to block you. So try and find a happy medium, folks, and you and I will get along just great.
I think that's fair game if
Yeah.
you're getting harassed in your inbox.
Yes.
I've got, on that note of sources, there's a question from Karen that I think is really, really interesting, especially in the context of Future of Good. And then Steve, I'll come to you in with your hand raised. So Karen asked, those who serve vulnerable people struggle to put clients in front of the mic or the camera.
Mhm.
How important is that to media to have that, or can staff tell those stories? And I think this is actually something that us as a newsroom at Future of Good, we particularly come up against pretty much all the time, probably every single day, because of
So yeah, it becomes that is a struggle, and I think it's because especially the reporters who work here, you know, it's becoming more taught in schools, but trauma-informed reporting is a thing that is slowly making its way into newsrooms. And over the past, I would say 10 years, you know, we've really struggled with making sure that the people we interview are not exploited. That can be really, really difficult to manage. And we do our best to tread carefully, simply because quite often when a victim or somebody is telling their story, they are being re-victimized in some way. Either they're reliving their past trauma, or, you know, the story comes out and it's not quite what they were expecting, or the journalist, you know, asks really hurtful or ignorant questions. And we really don't want to do that. So I would say this has shifted over the past few years. Normally we would be like, yeah, we want to talk to the person it happened to, but we're starting to also understand that, especially when you have a nonprofit or a charity or an advocacy group that has worked with the victims, we understand that you're also the experts with working with the victims, and that you can still tell a story in a different way rather than always having to go to the victim. So, and some people are very willing to tell their story and are happy to tell their story. But I guess I would say, you know, if you're working and you're advocating for something, and the people that you work with are dealing with trauma, you know, to also tread carefully. We tread carefully. Do not ever try and convince somebody to do it. But if they come to you, you know, please, you know, listen to their story, let them know some of the consequences, which could be, you know, there's always the court of public opinion. And that can also be really, really hard for people once they've spoken to media, how some people react to it. So there's all sorts of consequences to talking to the media. And we just want people to really be informed of what those are before you do that. Because my goal is always, we always have to balance, you know, the public good versus the private good. And by private, I mean personal, like individual. And sometimes that individual's hurt is more important than the public good.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, my favorite one is, you know, that Star Trek reference, you know, sometimes the needs of the, you know, it's always assumed that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Sometimes the needs of the few do outweigh the needs of the many. And so that is a challenge that we deal with on a regular basis. And I really appreciate you asking that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really important part, particularly of the journalism that we do at Future of Good, because it's totally right what Elisha has said, in that it's such a big part of the discussions that we have day to day, and it does add color to a story. It absolutely does. But do we want to do that at the expense of someone's well-being? Absolutely not. And I won't sit here and say that all newsrooms have that same policy. So there's
That's
absolutely
true. That is true. And I don't want to be like, oh, Future of Good is fantastic and you should only bring us our stories. I mean, obviously I feel that way, but you know, in a very biased, you know, I love my job kind of way. But that's where a little research can help too. A lot of newsrooms do have their editorial standards and ethics available on their website, so I encourage you to look them up.
Absolutely. We are fast running out of time, but Steve, I'm going to come to you because you've had your hand up for a little while. Thank you for.
Thank you very much. Elisha, I was very touched with the way you touched about the trauma in your ethics. That's why I hold Future of Good at a high standard.
Thank you.
My question is, you spoke about politics in charities and non-for-profit. Can you tell us the Elisha version of that?
So with great power comes great responsibility. And with great money comes great power. And with great money and people who want to do good, there are so many amazing foundations that really want to do their work well. But even foundations, and some of them that we have reported on, have begun to understand that there is always a power dynamic when you have money going to good. And they've tried really hard to fix that power dynamic, but it's not such an easy thing to do. So, and people don't really seem to tend to think or realize that the politics are behind money. But when I say politics are behind money, I'm not talking about what's happening on Capitol Hill or what's happening at the legislative building or even what's happening at City Hall. What I'm talking about is the influence that money brings, and the people who are giving away their money, who are fantastic, wonderful people who have every right to spend their money or give it away however they want, because it's theirs to do with what they will. There is still that inherent power imbalance. And it's something that is slowly, again, being recognized. But again, everyone has a bias. Everybody has a way that they see the world. Everybody has a way that they want the world to be. And we all know that those do not match up in any way, shape, or form. So when I'm talking about the power, the money and the politics behind it, that's what I'm talking about. This board is made up of people who all know each other and have worked together very, very well. Have they actually considered other perspectives? I don't know that, but that little group is a power group that is unelected, and it controls people's futures, it controls people's lives, it controls charitable works, and so there's an inherent power in there, and so that is something that also needs to be called into question. Even though it's private money, there is still a standard there. So it's not something that is talked about very much at all, because the goal has always been, or the general wisdom has always been, it's their money, they can spend it how they want, which is true. But I still think it's worth it to question that money sometimes.
Absolutely. I'm going to add one more thing to that, which
Please.
is there is also a literal sort of policy and politics question there when it comes to charities and nonprofits, right? Those are their legal designations. An organization says that I am signing up to be X type of organization or putting a bit more money in to be the other type of organization. They are beholden to quite particular restrictions, which in some of the reporting that I've done, I think exposes them to feeling as though they can't advocate for their causes in some respect as well. We've done quite a few stories recently on lobbying, both for the federal or before the federal election, and last week published a story on lobbying in British Columbia and the extent to which nonprofits felt as though they were in a position where they could lobby when there were such high, not necessarily restrictions, but reporting requirements that they had to meet. So there's sort of that political and policy element as well, which doesn't always restrict charities and nonprofits, but absolutely does have some parameters and rules and guidelines of what folks can do. And that's a power imbalance as well that we absolutely have to pay attention to. We are fast approaching the end of the hour. So Elisha, any final thoughts that you're going to leave folks with before we head off?
I encourage people to reach out. I read every single email I get. And you can find me on LinkedIn, and I encourage you to connect with me there. But I guess I would say, like we had said before, sometimes it feels like you're shouting into the ether and no one's paying attention. But please keep reaching out to us, because like I said, if we don't know about it, we definitely will not do it. So don't get discouraged if we don't respond, or any newsroom doesn't respond. It's not about you. It really, really isn't, I promise. Don't be afraid to repitch something. Don't become a stalker. I'm hopeful that talking today, and as we continue to do these kinds of storyteller camps, that I can demystify this a little bit for folks, and that you'll have the courage to reach out, because, like I said, I know how scary it is to reach out to a newsroom and to put your organization in the spotlight, or to take a stance on an issue. It can be actually a hugely fearful thing for some people. So I do recognize and the bravery it takes to reach out to us. So please do it. And I have been told that we put out a survey at the end of every time we do this kind of thing. We do ask you to fill out the survey, because that informs other things that we can talk about. So if you want to have a further conversation about this, that's where you tell us in the survey. And because I'd love to talk about this, and as Sharlene knows, I could talk about this forever. So
as can I. Just want to also say thank you to everybody for being so engaged. This is one of the most engaged sessions
it's been fantastic. Thank you.
And having also been part of the previous two, it's been fantastic to actually be able to talk to people and know that we're not writing to and speaking to a brick wall. So thank you so much for all dropping your questions in and coming off mute and putting your cameras on, because I know that's really brave as well. Well, enjoy the rest of your afternoons and your weeks. Thank you so much for joining us for our first Storyteller Camp. And thank you, Elisha, for
our second, technically.
Second. Got that wrong. And Elisha, for just sharing all of your wisdom from 20 years of reporting, 25 years of reporting.
Oh my goodness. It's too long.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Bye, folks. Thanks for joining us.